Hey, Moon Dancers, welcome. What a time it is to be alive right now. It has been pretty intense astrologically. I feel like there's always some sort of fire creeping into the cosmos, whether it be specific planets moving into certain signs or the change of the season or our kind of collective inability to process anger, frustration, grief, sadness. And what happens is we start to get an accumulation of what the Ayurvedics call pitta, which is a combination of the elements of fire and water. And I know for myself this past year in particular, and really if I sit back and reflect on it, it's really been probably an accumulation of many years that this kind of underlying anger, frustration, this really deep imbalance of pitta has been occurring within me. And I'm sure it's also reflective in the collective as well. We move through life thinking like, oh, I'm the only one this is happening to. But the more that I speak on it and the more that I relate to others on it, I realize that we're all struggling with similar situations. And what the anger, what the fire, kind of the root cause of that is different for everybody, but the essence is the same. For me, I've held on to a lot of anger, frustration, grief through the death of my grandmother. She got sick unexpectedly at the age of 87, and she went down rather quickly. And although I was able to be there with her in her final days, it was still so incredibly devastating. And if you know anything about astrology, I'm a Libra rising. Libra is all about like fairness and justice. And I just felt the way she was taken out was incredibly unfair. And I just had held on to this like burning anger. And that's really what started my sadhana journey and where I am today. I just did, my 634th day of sadhana, and I really did that practice of sadhana as a practice that you do every single day. Traditionally, it would be some sort of spiritual practice, whether it be Kundalini Kriya, a yoga practice, a meditation, breathwork practice, mantra. But in this kind of modern realm, it can really be anything that serves you. It could be something that you do every single day, this ritual to help ground and give you the space to process. And so, kind of when my grandmother got sick, and even probably before that, most likely when I was pregnant and postpartum with, I would say even both of my daughters. So this could date back, 5-ish years where this kind of pitta imbalance, this fire and anger and confusion and frustration and really grief really started. You have to grieve the old version of who you were when you step into parenthood. And when you add babies into the mix, you're grieving different parts of your life. And I also made a massive transition moving away from the studio that I had worked at for 8 years. And the way that that relationship ended was not the way that I had hoped that it would go, which then caused and came with it a lot of grief, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger and confusion and sadness. And so this past year, not only have I been grieving the death of my grandfather passed just 7 months later. I was able to be with him in his final days as well. And so that's something I'm incredibly grateful for. But I'm also grieving this kind of past life of who I was for the last 8 years at this particular studio that didn't end well. It didn't and in the way that I had hoped for the amount of effort, love that I had poured into the place. And you know what? Sometimes that's just the way it fucking goes, unfortunately. And also, fortunately, because through all of this, I've learned an incredible amount about myself and my tendencies. And I've learned an incredible amount about like just the humanness of being alive and that we have so much that we're moving through. And, I am no exception. I practice yoga, meditation, Ayurveda very religiously, and I still struggle very much so. And so, my hope is that sharing this kind of wisdom of the sacred fire within Agni, Pitta, and the art of inner digestion will help you to realize that we are able to move through our pain, our sorrow, our suffering through the health of our digestion. And in Sanskrit, that fire is your Agni, and it's directly related to Pitta dosha, the fire and water element within our bodies. And so, all of that to just kind of get us into this idea of how incredibly important our Agni and digestive fire is. Now, at the very peak of my like anger this past year, I was so bloated. I was so inflamed. I had so much acne. I was gassy. I felt absolutely terrible. And then, along with that, then it seeped into every single facet of my entire life. My ability to parent, it seeped into my marriage and my relationships. And I was definitely also numbing and kind of potentially maybe even trying to bypass or maybe not even bypass, but more so like I was just so fucking stuck in the anger. And I remember my mom and my husband both being like, just a couple of maybe even like 6 weeks ago, my mom was like, Mandy, you got to pull yourself out of this. You need to move on and you need to let this go because the only person that is suffering from this is you. And although maybe outside of context, it can seem a little harsh, but that's kind of the wake up I needed. And my husband said the same thing around the same time. And he was like, this isn't who you are. You aren't an angry person. You are letting your fire burn you instead of using it to create radiance and brilliance. You're letting your fire bring you down. And I want to show up in the world in the best, most vibrant, most luminous version of myself in my all of my relationships with my daughters, with my husband, with all of my friends and my students, my clients. I want to be the best version of myself that I can be and allowing myself to be stuck in this anger, frustration, grief, sadness. I wasn't moving through and processing properly. And it makes me just like wonder, like, if I didn't have my sadhana practice, how much more I would have been engulfed in the flames. And it's amazing how lost you can get quickly. And so, my hope is for you to understand that Agni, your digestive system, literally every single thing that you put into your body, food, drinks, books, conversations, movies, music, songs, podcasts, every single thing that we ingest through all of our senses needs to be digested. And if our Agni, our digestion is weak, we create what is called ama or toxins in the body. And as we get an accumulation of ama, we begin to feel stuck. We begin to get sick. There's dis-ease in the body. And we have this inability to function properly. So in Ayurveda, fire is not merely heat, it is the intelligence with a flame-colored face. It transforms seed into tree, food into tissue, experience into wisdom, and breath into vitality, and suffering into clarity. This sacred force is called Agni. And without Agni, nothing changes. With too much, everything burns. And that's what I was doing, was burning my whole fucking life down. And with too little, life becomes damp, heavy, and unfinished. So wherever you fall on the spectrum, bringing your Agni back into balance is one of the most beneficial things that you could ever do. Modern culture often speaks about metabolism, really only in terms of calories and chemistry. And Ayurveda really sees digestion as this multi-dimensional ceremony that's happening constantly across the body, mind, emotion, and subtle energy. We are not only digesting food, we are digesting conversations, heartbreak, sensory overload, ambition, grief, sunlight, information, memory, and even the spiritual practice itself. Fire lives everywhere. And everywhere it asks the same question. Can you transform what life has given you without becoming consumed by it? So, can you transform what life has given you without becoming consumed by it? And that has been my problem this last year is I was allowing myself to be consumed by the fire instead of allowing it to transform or and instead of allowing it to light my new pathway. Agni you can think of as the flame of transformation. In Ayurvedic understanding, Agni means digestive fire, but this phrase only hints at its depth. Agni governs every transformative process in the body and psyche. When Agni is balanced, digestion is strong, perception is clear, emotions move cleanly, intuition sharpens, immunity strengthens, and the mind becomes luminous rather than reactive. Mm, that was my problem. I was living in reaction, living in this constant fight or flight, and it was fucking exhausting. And it has been about 6 weeks since I did this full moon ritual to just like completely let it go. And I cannot even describe to you how much better I feel. I feel lighter. I can breathe deeper. My digestion is stronger than ever. And I feel crystal clear. When Agni is disturbed, toxins accumulate. And Ayurveda calls these undigested residues ama, as I mentioned. Ama is not only physical sludge, it's emotional resentment, which I had a fuck ton of. Mental confusion, check. Spiritual bypassing, yep. Overstimulation, absolutely. And suppressed grief are all forms of undigested experience. Agni is therefore simply biological, not simply biological. It is existential. Pitta, this is the dosha of fire and intelligence. So there are three doshas according to Ayurveda: Vata, air and space; Pitta, fire, water; Kapha, earth and water. Pitta carries the primary principle of fire. It's composed of fire and just a little bit of water, like molten gold or volcanic soup. My teacher describes Pitta as fire kind of contained within this thin layer of water. Pitta governs metabolism, hormonal transformation, vision, discernment, courage, ambition, precision, digestion, sharp intellect. And what's really interesting as I think back on this past year is my I got LASIK done almost a decade ago, and so I have very good vision now. And this past year, I've really struggled with my vision, with my sight because my pitta has been so imbalanced. And so this imbalance will show up in the body. Your body absolutely speaks your mind and emotions. A balanced pitta creates brilliance, leadership, vitality, and disciplined compassion. An imbalanced pitta becomes irritability, yup, inflammation, perfectionism, judgment, ulcers, burnout, rage, excessive control, and spiritual arrogance. A healthy flame cooks the meal, an excessive flame scorches the pot. Modern life tends to worship aggravated pitta. Productivity culture often rewards people for burning themselves into achievement confetti. The body eventually whispers, then protests, then erupts. Ayurveda listens before the eruption. There are five dimensions of digestion. One, the physical digestion. This is the belly fire. The most obvious form of Agni lives right in your gut. Strong digestive fire absorbs nutrients efficiently, eliminates waste cleanly, produces steady energy, and creates warmth and vitality. A weak, disturbed Agni may appear as bloating, acid reflux, constipation, lethargy, cravings, inflammatory disorders. Ayurveda emphasizes how we eat as much as what we eat. So, how do we balance the physical fire? Eat at regular times, favor warm cooked foods, avoid overeating, sip warm water or ginger tea, eat without screens or emotional chaos, and let the previous meal digest before eating again. I would get so irritated when my daughters, I have a 5 and a 3-year-old, when they would eat dinner and they would take so long to eat everything. And I was just angry. And it made dinner time unbearable for all of us. And finally, I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to force them to eat. I'm going to put the food in front of them and they can eat what they want. If they don't eat it all, then that's fine. That is totally fine. I am taking their autonomy away, and me forcing this food down their throat is creating so much resentment and anger at the dinner table, a place where I want our dinner table to hold so many good memories. And I was bringing so much fire to the table that I burned the whole table down every single time we ate. Now it's so much fun. We chat and we laugh and we talk. And if they eat, they eat. If they don't, they don't. And it's not a big deal. And so this has just been so like liberating to have my fire contained. For excessive pitta, you really want to focus on favoring cooling foods. Think cucumbers, watermelon, cilantro, parsley, fresh basil. These are all really cooling foods that are really beautiful to integrate when you have excessive pitta. Reduce alcohol, excessive chili, and fried foods. Now, to bring it back to that, when I was peaking in my anger, I was eating so much fried food. My digestion was so fucked up, and I felt absolutely horrific. And when I realized like I'm just adding more fuel to the fire because Ayurveda believes like increases like. And so I was adding way more fuel to the fire. And when I realized that, I started to pull away from those and eat what my teacher calls soul foods, seasonal, organic, unprocessed, and local. As I mentioned before, avoid eating while angry. Your food literally takes on the prana that you are putting out, and then you take on the prana that your food has. And so you're just adding more anger into your body when you're eating angry. As I mentioned before, include cilantro, mint, fennel, cucumber, coconut, all really good cooling foods. Digestion really begins at the first bite. And the nervous system, you can think of lights the stove. The second is emotional digestion. This is the fire of feeling. Some emotions pass through like weather, others remain half digested for decades, becoming emotional ama. Unprocessed anger often indicates aggravated fire. Suppressed grief can dampen Agni, and fear scatters it like sparks in the wind. Ayurveda teaches that emotions are psychological events, not abstract. Ayurveda teaches that emotions are physiological events, not abstract psychological inconveniences. The liver, small intestine, and blood are especially associated with pitta imbalance. And chronic resentment and irritation often manifest physically because emotional digestion and bodily digestion are inseparable rivers. Signs of poor emotional digestion, repetitive emotional loops, emotional numbness, explosive reactions, bitterness, inability to forgive, and chronic irritation. And one thing that I have really used in these past several weeks is the ability of forgiving, but not forgetting. Like forgive. And because you forgive doesn't mean that you have to forget what happened or how it made you feel. But forgiving liberates you more than it does the person, place, or situation that you are forgiving. Yogic and tantric practices, really cooling breath practices like shitali, pranayama. It's where you inhale through an O-shaped mouth and you exhale through your nose. Do that whenever you need to cool down for as long as you need to. This practice really cools internal heat and soothes reactive emotional states. Moon practices, tantric systems often prescribe lunar balancing for fiery constitutions. So think moon gazing, like literally looking up at the moon, evening meditations, chanting under moonlight, and left nostril breathing. You basically will just close off your right nostril and inhale, exhale through your left nostril. The moon does not extinguish fire, but rather it teaches fire how to glow instead of attack. Number three, mental digestion, processing thought and information. The mind consumes information like an endless buffet under fluorescent lighting. Mental Agni governs comprehension, discrimination, focus, integrative knowledge. Weak mental digestion creates confusion. Excessive mental fire creates criticism, obsession, and overanalysis. A sharp intellect without softness becomes a blade with no sheath. Signs of excessive mental fire, compulsive thinking, intellectual aggression, impatience, insomnia, inability to rest, and constant optimization. Ayurvedic support, reduce overstimulation, practice silence, spend time in nature, avoid doom scrolling before sleep, and cultivating sattva, this kind of pure, clean energy through beauty, music, mantra, and simplification. Yogic practices, traktaka. This is soft candle gazing, a paradoxical fire practice, if you will. Gazing gently at a flame can really stabilize scattered mental energy, and when done calmly and without strain. You can look into a campfire. If you have a fireplace, you could light a candle and just gaze gently into the flame. Yoga Nidra is a deep yogic rest that cools an overworked mental furnace. You can find yoga nidras all over the place. I have a ton of free yoga nidras on my podcast for you to enjoy. So I really, really recommend integrating that into your practice. Mantra japa, this is the repetition of mantras, and you can create your own mantra, or you could use a mantra like Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. This means peace, peace, peace. Soham means really like I am that, just like connecting you deeply to yourself and to the infinite. And Om Namah Shivaya is a mantra to Shiva. He is the great destroyer and liberator. And these repeating mantras really help to reorganize fragmented mental energy into rhythmic coherence. One of my very favorite mantras is from the Kundalini tradition, and it's Sat Nam. Sat Nam means truth is my identity, truth is my essence. And I've been really using this mantra to help bring me back into this truth of who I am. And it's been really powerful. Number four, pranic digestion, with transforming life force. Prana is the subtle current of life itself. We digest not only food, but also energy. Certain places nourish us instantly, and others drain us before a word is spoken. Pranic Agni governs how we metabolize life force input. When pranic digestion is impaired, exhaustion persists despite rest, spiritual practices feel dry, breath becomes shallow, and vitality leaks constantly. Yogic approaches, Nadi Shodanan, alternate nostril breathing. This balances solar and lunar currents. Excellent for harmonizing excessive pitta and stabilizing the nervous system. You'll close off one nostril, inhale, close that off, exhale through the opposite nostril, and you'll do that in a rhythmic pattern. Bandhas and subtle fire. Bandha is a lock in the body. So advanced tantric systems really speak of awakening inner fire through practices involving Uddiyana Bandha, which is the solar plexus bandha, the belly bandha that pulls up and in. Agni, Sara, and Kalabati. Kalabati is breath of fire. These should be practiced carefully and traditionally under guidance, especially for really fiery constitutions. I am a seasoned yoga teacher and also a certified Ayurvedic health counselor. And so if these practices are something that you're very much interested in, please reach out. I have a free discovery call link that you can book through, and we can kind of work through and build a plan together to help you move through this and bring your digestion into its most robust state, which then brings you into your most vital, healthy, radiant state, all through balancing your Agni. These sacred fire practices really amplify what already exists. And it's really important to have a guide to help ground you in this transformation. An imbalanced psyche can become more imbalanced if fire is intensified recklessly. Tantra is not about becoming spiritually overheated, it's about conscious refinement. Number five, spiritual digestion. So, burning through the illusion. There is also a higher Agni, the fire of awareness itself. This fire burns arrogance, ego fixation, attachment, and unconscious conditioning. In yogic philosophy, transformation requires tapas, this disciplined inner heat. Tapas is not punishment, it is sacred friction. The caterpillar dissolves before becoming the winged geometry. Yet spiritual fire must be balanced with compassion and grounding. And many seekers unknowingly inflame themselves through excessive striving, too much fasting, too much Kundalini stimulation, too much strength practices, sculpt practices, vinyasa practices, obsessive discipline, and identity built around transcendence. A balanced spiritual path feels illuminating, not consuming. Two foods that I really highly recommend to help balance all five bodies of Agni is kitchari and kanji. You can think of these as sacred foods for rekindling your Agni. In Ayurveda, healing often begins with simplification. So when digestive fire becomes exhausted or overstimulated, irregular eating, emotional intensity, stress, travel, or seasonal change, the body benefits from foods that are warm, soft, grounding, and easy to transform. Two of Ayurveda's most beloved restorative preparations are kitchari and kanji. These are not cleanses in the modern punitive sense. These are acts of digestive compassion. They reduce the burden of Agni so the body can remember how to heal itself. Kitchari, I call the sacred reset meal. It's traditionally made from rice, mung beans, different digestive spices, butter, ghee, or coconut oil, or even sesame oil. Coconut oil is really good for cooling Agni, and seasonal vegetables. In Ayurveda, it's considered one of the most balancing and sattvic, pure meals that you could possibly eat. It nourishes while giving the digestive system a really profound opportunity to rest. Because kitchari is simple and easy to assimilate, the body can redirect energy away from heavy digestion toward tissue repair, detoxification, immune support, nervous system regulation, and emotional recalibration. When we are experiencing kind of a heightened or exhausted pitta, kitchari is one of the best foods that you can do, and you can make it cooling or you can make it heating. So if you have too much pitta, you would take a more cooling approach. And if you don't have enough pitta, then you would take a more warming approach. And all of that can be done with the help of an Ayurvedic practitioner. Kanji, you can think of as the medicine of softness. Kanji is also known in various traditions as like a rice porridge. And it's one of the oldest healing foods across Asia. It's made from rice slowly cooked in abundant water and or broth until it becomes soft and almost completely dissolved. Kanji is deeply restorative to both the digestion and the nervous system. In Ayurveda, kanji is often used when digestion needs tenderness rather than intensity. It's especially supportive during burnout, illness recovery, grief, anxiety, depleted digestion, postpartum healing, seasonal transitions, and periods of spiritual exhaustion. A warm bowl of kanji asks very little of the body, and sometimes this is the medicine. Traditional Ayurvedic approaches to kanji are adding in like maybe ginger, turmeric, cumin, ghee or butter, mineral-rich broths, soft vegetables, healing herbs, or you can do it with just simply rice, a little bit of butter or ghee, and water or broth. The long cooking process partially breaks down the grain, making the nutrients easier to absorb while calming aggravated vata and soothing excess pitta. And we kind of live in a world where we have way too much vata and we have way too much pitta. And so this helps ground and soothe and nourish the system, and it's so easy and so cheap to make, and it makes a ton. I have such a good kitchari, several good kitchari recipes, and a really good kanji recipe that I will share as well. Ayurveda also views these soft porridges really as a support to ojas. You can think of ojas as kind of like the subtle essence of vitality, immunity, and resilience. In yogic living, foods like kanji really carry a kind of energetic humility. They do not overstimulate the senses, but rather they restore rhythm. They create warmth without aggression, and like sitting beside embers instead of standing inside of the furnace. Detox in Ayurveda, you can think of it, it's not a punishment, but more so like a relief. Right. Modern detox culture often treats the body like an enemy camp that needs discipline and eradication. But Ayurveda takes a very radically different view. True cleansing is not about forcing the body, it is about supporting Agni gently enough that the system can release what it no longer needs. Kitchari cleanses through simplicity, kanji heals through softness, breathwork clears stagnant prana. Meditation digests mental residue, and rest restores the constant stimulation depletes. The Ayurvedic path is not about becoming emptier, it's about becoming clearer. A steady sacred flame burns cleanly, not violently, not endlessly, just enough to illuminate the next breath. The deeper teaching here of fire is that fire is sacred because it changes everything it touches. The ancients understood this very intimately. Vedic rituals offered prayers into flame, not because fire was symbolic, but because fire was seen as a messenger between worlds. Agni carried offerings from the human realm up into the divine. The same is true internally. Every experience enters the altar of your nervous system, asking to be transformed. Some become nourishment, some become toxins, some become wisdom. Your life depends on the quality of fire processing them. So the question is not whether you possess fire, you absolutely do. The question is whether your fire is serving consciousness or merely consuming fuel endlessly, like a city that forgot how to see the stars. Your healing is not meant to be navigated alone. There comes a moment when the body stops whispering and starts asking for more clear change. Maybe your digestion feels unpredictable no matter how healthy you eat. Maybe stress, inflammation, exhaustion, emotional overwhelm, anxiety, burnout, or hormonal balance have really become like the background noise that you've learned to normalize. Or perhaps you are simply feeling disconnected from yourself, craving a way of living that feels softer, more grounded, more intuitive, and deeply nourishing. Ayurveda teaches that healing is not about forcing the body into submission. It's about understanding your unique constitution, your patterns and tendencies, your fire, and your needs in this season of life. And that's really why working one-on-one with an Ayurvedic health counselor, such as myself or a different practitioner of Ayurveda, can really be incredibly transformative. And every single practice that I recommend to my clients, I have personally done myself. And what's so beautiful about Ayurveda is that there's so many different avenues that we can explore to help bring you back into balance because what works for me might not work for you, or maybe it does right now, but it won't in the future. My teacher says that your our medicine eventually becomes our poison, and our poison eventually becomes our medicine. And it's this delicate dance. And that is really what the support of an Ayurvedic health counselor or practitioner can become a dance partner with you as you learn what functions best for your body at this season of life that you're in right now and how to understand and listen and move through these changes. And my Shakti school sisters that have helped me along the way and processing this last really 5, 6 years has been so incredibly valuable. And I had really started my Ayurvedic journey through the Shakti school to mostly understand and heal myself. And as I have deepened that study, I felt as if it would be a disservice if I didn't share this information. And also, like speaking of my challenges and struggles, I think brings back this humanness in people. We put these kind of practitioners and teachers on this pedestal, and we are like, they have it all figured out. And that could be no further from the truth. We are all humans in this world struggling to understand ourselves. And Ayurveda, yoga, Kundalini, Tantra, meditation, breath work, these are all practices to bring ourselves back to ourselves. And ultimately, when we return home to who we are, the collective heals as well. So together we look really beyond the surface and symptoms to understand the root imbalances that are affecting your digestion, your nervous system, your energy, your emotions, and your daily rhythms. Through personalized Ayurvedic guidance, supportive rituals, nourishing foods, breath work, lifestyle practices, and really compassionate accountability, we create a path toward healing that's sustainable, embodied, and aligned with you. And remember, I'm right on this path with you. And I remember my teacher saying sometimes it's better to have someone that's just a couple of steps ahead of you rather than, a mile, 5 miles ahead of you, because you can relate better to each other. You do not need another extreme protocol. You do not need to push through. You do not need to figure it out alone. You need support that helps your inner fire burn steadily again. If you're ready to deepen your healing journey and really received personalized Ayurvedic, yogic support for your body, mind, and nervous system, know that I would be so honored to walk alongside you. And I also know like I'm not for everyone. And so finding a practitioner that will help you, a teacher that will support you is so important. I have so many ways that we can work together one-on-one. I have an on-demand studio. I have a beautiful community of wisdom seekers that are here to welcome you with open arms. You can feel very lost in this world, very overwhelmed in this world. And one thing that I love so much about yoga and Ayurveda is that it's such a personalized experience, but when done with the support of a community, you are able to really transform on such a deep level. And so just know that this is hard. Life is hard, but it's also beautiful and it's amazing. And when we're able to move through these stuck places that we are, we allow our prana to move more freely and we live a more beautiful life. And that's not to say that things aren't going to come rattle and shake you because they always will, but you're able to ride those waves with more grace, more compassion, more vitality, more radiance. You become this luminous light, regardless of what is crashing on your shores. So get your Agni in line, ground yourself, and enjoy the liberation that comes from a balanced Pitta fire, the sacredness that's inside of you. Let it fuel you and transform you rather than engulfing you and burning you down. You have everything you need already right inside of you. Let the fire transform you instead of holding you back.